Welcome everybody to the Silicon Valley Supply Chain Meetup discussion panel on nearshoring. I'm hosting. I'm Michelle from Supplino. My co-host is Eugene Grappa. Wave your, yeah, okay. So if you need anything, put it in the chat. Gene's watching the chat and the room, and he'll be helping me with the logistics of just running the group today. It's a panel
Welcome,
discussion.
everyone.
We keep this pretty casual, right? It's an open discussion. We start with the panelists, and then anybody from the audience that wants to come in and make a comment or a question on the topic, you guys are welcome to do so. These are open to anybody interested in the topic, whether you're a longtime practitioner of supply chain, you're a consultant, you're a student, you're just curious about this kind of thing. Maybe you run a company that's affected by nearshoring, one way or the other. Everybody's welcome, and it's just good to get everybody together and find out what is going on this topic. What are people seeing? What are the different opinions that are out there, and learn from each other as a community, right? So that's the scoop today. Okay, the agenda is, it looks very formal, but it's actually pretty loose. Considering that it's, I'm going to give you a quick intro just into us in the Silicon Valley Supply Chain Meetup, what we're about, intro to us in Supplino, so you know who we are. The speakers, the panelists are all going to give their intros, and then we're just going to get into it. I've got some questions for them. We are using today a Deloitte article as a reference. And I have a link to that. I'll show you some of the charts, and I'll show you the link. You can click on it to get to the article if you haven't seen it already from the Meetup link. But I think it was a good article because it gave some forecasting, and it gave some good information in terms of where is the nearshoring going, who's the receiver and the benefit of all this nearshoring, supposedly. And then that lets us talk about, you know, are these guys ready? Is everybody ready? And are these the right places to move production to in the world? Okay. And so it's a, like I said, open discussion, panelists we start with, but then we open it up into everybody else. So really interested in hearing your experience, and longtime practitioners have been through this for a couple of waves. And I'm interested to see if there's a difference now that nearshoring than, 20, 30 years ago, when we were talking about everything going first to Mexico, and then everything went to China from there. So, all right. Worldwide Supply Chain Federation, FYI, the Silicon Valley Supply Chain Meetup is a chapter of a national organization called the Silicon Valley, or the Worldwide Supply Chain Federation. And it's true, it's worldwide, it's global, it's not even national. There are many different chapters. Many of them are on Meetup. Go on and sign up. In this virtual world, you do not have to be in these cities, right, to participate in these conversations. In the Silicon Valley one, we talk a lot about startups. The New York one talks a lot about tech. I mean, depending on where you are, you have kind of different groups of interest, but they're all really great, vibrant groups that you can be part of. So I encourage you guys to go ahead and look into those and see what everybody's talking about. Okay. Us, Supplino. Who's Supplino? It's me and Eugene. We are the co-founders of Supplino. We are leading, this is a company that is based in Northern California. We are global, and our company is fast access to supply chain talent and flexible supply chain talent in the world of consulting and freelancing. Right now, companies don't know where to find good flexible talent, and flexible consultants and agencies, freelancers don't know how to find those companies and find that market. And that's us in between. So we're the matchmakers. We have tremendous amounts of supply chain experience and have a great network of professional consultants and freelancers, some of which are in the group, in the discussion panel, and some of which are in the audience today. So that's us. And now let's get into introing the panelists today. So I don't know, we'll just go in order. Is Jeff here yet?
Not yet, Michelle.
Okay, so let's go to Akhil. You want to give it like a 2-minute intro, Akhil, on you and your background?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. And thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Eugenio, for having me here. Akhil Oltikar, co-founder and CEO of Omnics. Omnics is a supply chain software platform used by many companies across various industry verticals for the supply chain planning, optimization, and visibility. And my personal background being about 23 years in supply chain management, worked across many industry verticals, primarily, on both fronts with contract manufacturers as well as helping brand owners and OEMs with the supply chain design, optimization, S&OP, and related software technology that was implemented. So that's my quick background. So looking forward to this discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Okay, Yulia. Oh, wait. She's on mute. Let me see if I can unmute her.
Thank you.
There we
That's
go.
very sweet of you. Hi, I'm Yulia. I am founder at Zignify Global Product Sourcing. I've been in product sourcing, supply chain, and all of the relevant industries for the last 18 years. I've spent 12 years in Asia, so I have an on-the-ground experience there, as well as across the globe. We work and we do sourcing, supply chain, building and optimization for companies like Amazon, Siemens, big players on the market, small players on the market. So from a person who lives next door to you and has an Amazon store to Amazon themselves. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And Yulia, where are you based?
I'm personally based in Germany. Our company is based in Singapore. People who work in our company are based. Because why? Because sourcing and supply chain is kind of a global topic right now. So we need to deliver.
All right, super. All right. And Rich.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Rich Cirulli. Brief background, I had leadership roles in 3 pedigree companies, Raytheon Technologies, Knoll Furniture, and lastly, ILC Dover, sole producer of spacesuits for NASA since the Apollo program. Early 2021, I took an early retirement, opened my own agency, RJC Supply Chain Coaches, quickly engaged with the aerospace industry, particularly Boeing and Hevro DevTech, working diligently to, let's call it, realign the supply chain post-COVID hangover. And we're still seeing some of the effects. But anyway, thank you for having me.
Okay, great. So you guys really have a good cross section of experience to be talking about this project, but this topic, nearshoring. And we're going to get into, before I start asking you some questions here, let me go into the article. So you guys can see there's a link to the article down below here to the right. But what I liked about this article, so the article from Deloitte was really, it's actually a future of freight survey, right? So you'd say, well, freight, what's the difference? But what I like about the idea of asking the freight perspective is often when you're talking about nearshoring, people are talking about moving their supply in, or they're talking about moving their factories in, right? It's either internal production or external production. This really covers both because you're just talking about freight in general, right? And I thought it was interesting that the manufacturing executives and the freight executives here tracked so closely, even though the manufacturing executives were probably a little bit more bullish than the freight executives, right, on what they expect. So that's one of the reasons why I chose the article to kind of base the discussion around, because I thought that chart was particularly interesting. And then the next chart is also we're going to talk about a little bit, which is, where is all this going? When we talk about nearshoring, right? Near to who? And I'm interested in hearing from you guys. This is the Americas. They asked about in the Americas who benefits. But I'm also interested to hear about what are European companies considering nearshoring? Are they also in the same trend? Asian companies are Asian companies switching supply around Asia at all? Or is this really like an American thing? What's going on here? So that's part of the question. But in the Americas, you can see that the most of the intent is that they're going to bring it to the US, right? 68% to the US, 40% think Mexico, or Central America and Canada, the least out of the Americas. And then within the US to the right, the Midwest, which I think this is amazing to me, the Midwest, then Texas, not a region, one state, Texas, is planned for over a third of the benefit to the United States, and then the Southeast and the rest of the Southwest. So very interesting planning. Let's see if this is actually going to be the reality as people move, and if these regions are really ready for that kind of volume coming back onto shore, depending on what the commodity is and what the product and the process is, right? Okay, so let's get into, wait a minute, let me get back into my PowerPoint here. Just does not want to, all right. So let's just stick with this slide for a minute and let's just start the discussion. The first question I have for you guys is just like, what are you seeing, right? Who's moving where? What are you seeing for trends? Do you see like this amazing amount of expectation in the future? Are you seeing something more reserved or more aggressive than this, right? So let me start with Julia. Julia, what are you seeing in terms of people moving either supply? I mean, you're a sourcing company, right? So they're probably not moving production with you, they're moving their suppliers. Are you seeing a lot of that movement and that desire?
No, absolutely. But we also work with companies who have their own manufacturing facilities, and those are being moved as well.
Okay. Okay.
Let's say currently we're doing 50, if we're considering projects that are done outside of China and in China. So we're doing about 60% of projects that are done outside of China, and the 50% or 40% that are being done in China, they're decreasing day by day. And we have about 25 to 30% of projects where it's specifically focused on bringing the manufacturing facilities and bringing your general capabilities out of China to other countries and closer to home. If you look recently on the news, I literally read it in a local newspaper in the middle of Germany, in a village that and next to us, we have the DHL hub, the global hub, and Intel is moving the manufacturing of their chips here to Germany, to Saxony, where they're investing about, I think, 800 million as an initial investment, and then it's a few billion euros. So absolutely, the trend that we have seen even pre-corona was to move away and to move closer to your own, to the sales points, not necessarily to the places where the companies are established, because we have a lot of people and customers, for example, who have an established entity in one country for taxation reasons, but they sell in a completely different country. So they move the manufacturing closer to the point of sale. And in US, Mexico has been developing like crazy, that's for sure. A lot of people are going and manufacturing in US as it is. And to answer your question, can those guys handle those volumes? They cannot, because the volumes are huge. They don't have the setup anymore. They don't have the efficiency. They don't have the machinery, which they can buy, but you need to be taught how to use that machinery, right? If you never cooked breakfast, how are you going to learn how to cook breakfast, how to make? So the trend that we're seeing is exclusively for moving away from Asia, for example, if you're manufacturing something in China, even with electronics, to closer to home. We even see.
Let me pause you there, because I want to talk about challenges in depth next, because I think there are we see the challenge for the country to accept all this stuff, or the company that's going to take it. And there's also challenges for the company that's sending or moving, right? Do they know how to manage? Can they manage moving their factory or the supplier? But and I wanted to ask one more question to you before I move on to somebody else. Are you getting clients that are telling you, I have a new sourcing project, but I don't want China? Like they're specifically saying like no Asia?
Every second one.
Yeah, like half, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Every second one. But they are very disillusioned They think if they will move away from China and battle the Trump tax, that all things will be flowers and butterflies
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
blue skies. But no,
Yeah.
that's where the problems arise, which we
Yeah,
can
yeah. And they probably don't want to
get
pay
later.
anymore. They're probably like, I want the same cost, just not in China. Yeah. I mean,
Pretty
yeah.
much. I
Yeah.
mean, most of the people, they say we want you to pay us because you do work for, but yes, they want the same prices, which is impossible.
All right.
Yep.
All right. So let me move to Rich. Rich, what are you seeing these days and what have you been involved in from
Well,
this? Are you seeing the same thing at a different scale or a different view from Julia?
I'm reading the articles and, my head sort of spins because I think a lot of this is reactionary to, the congestion that occurred during COVID and the horrific ocean freight rates. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so my perspective is more of, who do you want to be when you grow up? Do you want to be involved in a global economy or do you want to be involved in a buy American economy? Okay. And I think it varies by industry, depending on what you're buying. Okay. So if you're buying something that's purchased for resale versus you're buying an item or a widget used in the manufacturing process. And, I heard what you said, Michelle, about in the 1980s, everything was go global, right? Well, I still believe there's some truth to that. Okay. And it comes down to how competitive do you want to be in your industry? Okay. And if you want to be competitive, everything's going to boil down to gross margin percent, right?
Yeah.
So the decision on where you buy should be based on a litany of 10 or 12 different things. Okay. And I'll start with total cost of ownership. Okay. Simple phrase, but in reality, you're looking at quality, right? What's the cost of poor quality? Is the item life critical? What's the risk of a recall? What type
Yeah.
of warranty do you have on that product? What is the speed you need it? And this links into your planning process, which could affect your line of balance in your factory. Total transportation cost, ocean, delivery, tariff impact, import cost, brokerage. And then you get into the most important one, which I think is risk analysis. Okay.
Yeah.
What's the potential for a business interruption from war, terrorism, restricted country, embargoes? And then you have to ask the question, am I single source? Am I dual source? And then what's my carrying cost? What's the impact on working capital?
Yeah. So you're saying use, don't be so reactionary. Like, I mean, I think the nearshoring dream comes from that risk category, right? Like everybody's worried about that risk category suddenly.
But yeah, that's one factor. Okay.
Yeah.
But like everything else, it's about balance.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a business decision. Okay. That no matter what you're doing, there's going to be risk somewhere. Okay. What you're doing is weighing the risk. And at the end of the day, if it comes down to a number in a little box saying, I can't be competitive if I'm buying near shore or on shore, what do you do?
Right.
I mean,
Right.
that's really the question.
Yeah. Akhil, you want to jump in here? What are you seeing? What's your experience with this? And what are you seeing from your perspective?
So, Michelle, I think what Yulia and Richard mentioned about this is, I'll take a little bit, I'll go a couple decades back to kind of set the picture. So if we look at that, there was wave one, which was probably 80s and early 90s, where companies started outsourcing their manufacturing, right? Lower components, lower value components, PCBAs, boards, and smaller components. Then came the second wave, which came the offshoring, right?
Yeah.
Everything was moving to China. And again, to the point earlier mentioned, without the thinking around, does it make sense for that company, to move everything to China? But it happened.
Yeah.
We are in this third wave where everyone is talking about nearshoring. And then there is this, of course, there was as Yulia mentioned, there was, pre-COVID also, we started seeing this. Our customers, my previous customers, everyone was talking about that because of trade wars, geopolitical issues, so on and so forth.
Mhm.
But the challenge is that companies have to think not as nearshoring or onshoring, but we have to help them think about what is right shoring
Yeah.
based
Yeah.
on what their business is, what their product strategy is, and what really makes sense for them, because it's not one size fits all here. And that's what specifically talking about it, what our customers are seeing is when they come to us and talk about, okay, let's do a redesign of the entire supply chain network, looking at total cost of ownership and every single point that you mentioned, right, in terms of the inventory carrying cost, the risk associated with it, and so on and so forth. So we have to also look at, does it even make sense for that particular company, the product and the business model? I'll give you a very quick example. If you're in a fast moving consumer electronics, for example, that needs, somebody places an order and you need it, in 30 minutes or 2 hours, right? I mean, that's where everyone is trying to get to. You have to have a different strategy. And does your product really make sense to manufacture closer to your demand regions? And then secondly, also, I think Yulia mentioned, and that was spot on, is that we have to think about where the demand is also shifting. So if you are, we have had customers calling, say, oh, now we want to look at the ABC strategy, which is anything but China. I'm saying, sorry, that's not going to happen. So because at the end of it, if your market, your demand is also in China, you got to think about that as well, or Europe, for example, right? So you have to factor everything to understand what is right shoring versus simply going it. However, clearly there is a trend, and I'll be quick on this one. Automation, sustainability, risk resilience is making everyone think about how the manufacturing is done, and is encouraging the CEOs to think about where the manufacturing is to be done, right? And then partner with the right suppliers and contract manufacturers and so on. So clearly there is a trend, but to be cautious, it should not be the same way that everything moved to Asia and now everything can
move back to. And I think that's a really good point, because I think also consumers are much more aware of supply chain than ever before. I mean, let's face it, 2 years ago, your average consumer had no idea what the word supply chain even meant, right? And then all the disruptions happened, and the term was in the news every day. The New York Times assigned a supply chain reporter. I mean, this stuff was unheard of, right, a few years ago, right? Absolutely. And I think consumers in Europe, especially, I would put at the top, and then in the US, are very starting to become much more conscious and make decisions around, where is this stuff coming from? And is it sustainable? And do I feel good about employing the people that were involved in creating this product? That's becoming more of a blossoming awareness, which is, I think, nice to see, more informed consumerism. So, but, is the industry ready to then deliver that? Probably not, right? So at this point, let me open it up to this question of, like, what are you seeing? What's going on in your company? What trends are you doing? Let me open it up to the audience. Anybody want to chime in here and talk about what they're seeing or what their experience is here? Just give you a minute. Put it in the chat, because I don't know if you guys can unmute yourselves now or not.
Normally, everybody should be able to unmute.
Okay. All right. All right. So if
okay, Rob, let me unmute you just a second.
Hey, good morning, everybody.
Hi, Rob.
Hey, so what we're seeing with our clients at Simon.co. So we're just a little background. We're a Singapore-based company, and we've been our team has been in supply chain for over 20 years. Product design, manufacturing globally. Where the answer used to always be, it's automatically China. It's not so much a mass exodus. It's more of a hybrid approach that makes sense, because really it's not easy to just move tools, right? That's not so simple. You can do it, but the reality is, you got 100 tools sitting at a CM in Dongguan. You're not just going to rip and replace, right? So kind of a blended approach. We're really focused on giving customers other options. So we're building out ASEAN. So, Malaysia, Vietnam, Indonesia for alternate solutions. And so one case in particular, we have suppliers that it's part of our supply chain. We have a vetted network of suppliers globally. And our last trip to Johor Bahru in Malaysia, it's across the strait from Singapore, what we're doing with one of our suppliers there is essentially a hybrid approach. So the product, the end game is North America and endpoint. So essentially sourcing PCBA out of China, bring that into Malaysia, do injection molding, some value add, some other things, and then ship out of Malaysia to North America. So you kind of get the benefits of the PCBA factories, the SMT that's been built up, and the quality systems in mainland China, and all the DCs for the components, et cetera.
Well, let me ask you something there, Rob, though.
Sure.
Your customer there, if the customer there is saying, I don't want Asia because I don't want the risk from shipments or the risk of a long lead time, Malaysia doesn't answer that, right? So what were they looking like? Why did they want to get out of China? What was their driving factor, do you think?
Well, for this particular customer, it was to get around the tariff.
Tariffs. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So you're cashing 18% or 18 minimum plus.
Yeah.
By just kind of running the PC, getting getting those components, everything out of mainland China. And we'll take it. We'll throw a little further to even where they're consigning the active components to the supplier in China, building boards, shipping it to Malaysia, and then final assembly and shipping out of Malaysia to North America. So that's kind of to get around the tariff, but also you're kind of managing your tier 1 components, your actives, so without a doubt that those are known good components. So just one example.
Yeah.
When we have had the conversations, we do have some supply base in Mexico, in Tecate, Tijuana. Typically, it's the prices are a bit shocking. So when we start talking about, so you really want to move out of Asia, we think the hybrid approach makes more sense. Really depends on the overall size of the product. So one when it's absolutely possible, we still quote both, so that way the customer can decide. What it really kind of comes down to is just you need to have good planning. Yeah, and good planning software. So that's a nod to
be able to manage that different.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And what are you guys seeing? Like, so I've been out of the direct management of supply chain for a few years, and I know before I left, one of the concerns we had in China, outside of kind of just political and risk issues, was just the rising cost of labor, right? Yeah. Because China was becoming more, middle class, and the labor rates were going up. Where are the labor rate? What are you seeing in terms of the costs of labor in China versus where it used to be?
Yeah, I couldn't give you right now. Probably 30 to 40% higher over the past few years.
Okay, are you seeing that too, you guys? Rich, you got something?
Yeah, I have a comment I'd like to make. So, China's labor rate increased year over year about 13%. They're at like $6.50 an hour right now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and everyone in this group has just been using the word China, right? But in reality, India, Vietnam, Malaysia are really the hotspots for offshoring right now. Even Mexico, going through a maquiladora at the border is lower cost than China right now.
Yeah.
So, China's
Is
rate of growth
is that true? I didn't realize that. Mexico labor, Rob's saying maybe not. Like, maybe it depends on your product, right? On what you're doing.
Yeah, it really depends on the product.
The average maquiladora rate versus the average rate in China. So, but
it's
you think
interesting.
about China, the rate of growth is shrinking, and their wages are increasing.
Sure,
So that's
sure.
not an attractive scenario, you know, to gravitate towards.
Yeah. You know, it's funny because Akhil mentioned like in the early days when everything moved to China, like we all knew this. Let's face it, right? Everybody knew 20 years ago when China labor rates were like, you know, the lowest everywhere, that was not going to stay that way. And at some point there would be a reckoning when that labor came up and started equalizing other places. We weren't going to get those huge labor benefits.
Right.
Yeah, you know, Michelle, what I would say is that the key thing with the China suppliers is that they've really, at least for the suppliers that we engage with, there's a lot of automation.
Yeah, true.
That's really where, and that's kind of my point with like, you know, S&T, et cetera. It really just kind of comes down to the labor content. So really, it does.
If it's automated, then labor content isn't. Yeah, you don't really care what the labor rate is.
I would like to add a different.
Let me go, Akhil. Go ahead, Akhil.
Yeah, I would like to add a different angle to what we have seen and what we are seeing right now. I mean, if you look at the labor cost of a particular product, again, maybe I'm a little bit skewed towards electronics, you know, not just consumer electronics, but all kinds, because that's been my background. But if you look at the labor content, it's not the highest, right? You have to look at the material cost of it, the material overhead, the manufacturing overhead, so on and so forth. And then, of course, the transportation piece, the logistics piece, to look at the total landed cost, inventory, everything included there, right? So what we have also seen is that earlier there was a shift because there was also a mindset when, you know, the decision makers were looking at what is my X works or X factory cost, and not really factoring in the risk, the long lead times, the transportation, carrying costs, so on and so forth. And that has also changed. The mindset has to change to not just look at a particular labor content piece or something, because in fact, that is probably the smallest piece of the pie. And then the other factor that has actually started this trend, and again, just not because of COVID or tariffs, it started before COVID, what we have seen is that over all these years, supply chains are stretched, right? They're longer and longer. Now the question is the consumer mindset and how the delivery and the service to the end markets is, the expectations have changed. And I'll give you a perfect example. Amazon is doing a 2-hour delivery window. They're trying to hit that. With Amazon Prime Air, what they have announced, they want to do it 30 minutes, right? Have a product, of course, I mean, you know, you have to have a product, and depending on the volatility of the demand, you also need to produce that product much faster, not have this long supply chains. Now, having said that, you know, the supply base and the development of the supply base that has occurred in China particularly, or you can call it Asia, is just not easy to just replicate that, you know, closer to the demand regions, wherever they are, whether it's Mexico. Mexico is definitely very capable, what we have seen. But we know that over so many decades, the skill set, the know-how, the factories, the space, and also most importantly, the labor, you have that in Asia versus what we see in Mexico or in the US or even in Eastern Europe. So those are some of the challenges.
Yeah, so let's move into that.
Well,
because,
if I can just add one thing, Michelle, to go back what Rich and Akhil were talking about the cost of doing business or sourcing or having some sort of like a machining, you buy bar stock in someplace else, you send it to China for a low cost provider and you bring it in. United States is not going to make it any easier in the future, and that's evidenced by doing business with anything in China, because there's new forced labor requirements coming up. So think of conflict minerals in the Republic of Congo or anywhere else. There's now being that same thing is being applied to forced labor inside of China, and you have to prove sometimes all the way back to the foundry of where you're buying materials, or the silicon that's made, or even a machine shop. You have to prove, so that it's added to the cost. So that's the bottom of the iceberg cost that I think we need to take into consideration. Then you have to have people now assigned to it or hire a consultant to do this.
I think also just, Mitch, I think Europe just put this in, right? Yulia,
Yeah.
am I-
United-
I think there's
yeah.
this
We
requirement
can't
of full traceability, which how the hell people are going to do it? I don't know.
We're
Right.
doing it. I mean, we're doing it. Give a perfect example again, the products made out of wood and stuff like this. One of our
Yeah.
requirements is not even that it's not produced under strenuous labor, that it's FSC certified wood, etc., but the wood can't come from Russia. So we literally need to track
Yeah.
down the invoices saying the wood actually came from
Yeah.
Canada down to China, etc. This is why we're transferring a lot of the guys to, for example, Poland or manufacturing in Canada, because and this comes for textiles right now, or for silicone, or for tons of other goods, right? So this is
Yeah, so that traceability, Mitch, you're saying,
Yeah.
is now becoming an
Yeah.
added like burden, cost burden and labor burden. on top of
Right.
it.
So I think it will be an agent of change into the supply chains, as Yulia was just saying, is that maybe to make it, where can I go to get the same thing? Maybe not for the same exact price, where the burden of proof is just that much easier, and it's more end-to-end supply chain visibility, that's been talked about for the last decade.
Yeah.
Is
yeah.
that more and more, where is it a less pain in my butt to do business? In other words, to put it bluntly, where
Yeah,
can I go
yeah.
where this is not going to, I'm not going to get creamed, because this is going to come up in the ESG conversations, and it just all of a sudden explodes because it's the bright shiny new object on the deck. What are you doing about this? What are you doing about Europe and all this? It's going to become a burden. So that if you take what they said and you bring it back in, it goes right back to what Rich, Akhil, and Yulia were talking about, and Rob for the most part as well, is that it's cost. It's cost to the bottom line, because now you got to do this, and it's all cost, and it eats away at your margins. And how are you going to do that? So, and just to add one more thing, I raised my hand before a little bit. So the other thing that's happening is the real estate explosion along the Mexico-United States border, because it's that, there's some reports out there. Just, I think the Manufacturing Mexico website was talking about this. Just that if you had land in outside of Laredo, outside of San Diego, that inside of Mexico, you're making money hand over fist, because all of a sudden, because of USMCA and all the things we're talking about and the labor costs, there's a lot of people who are flooding, not everyone, but a lot of people are flooding back into Mexico, because to take advantage of what NAFTA was before. So you're having like the second birth of USMCA or NAFTA along that border. I think it's a fascinating time. History is being written in the books right now.
Yeah, it is interesting to watch this, isn't it?
I can hear Ross Perot many years ago,
Yeah.
that loud sucking stuff. Well, here it comes for the next breath.
Yeah. Rich, you had your hand up. You want to?
Yeah, I have a couple comments. So regarding Mexico, I actually had a maquiladora under my custody in Juarez, and I could tell you in 2017, our labor rate was about $2.40 an hour.
Wow.
In 2021, it was up close to $4 an hour. Now, what I experienced, and we haven't talked about this, is actual labor. Okay, so to the gentleman I was just talking before, you just have lines of buildings along the border. Okay, every major corporation in the United States. And then in the middle of the street, there are tents, okay, with signs trying to recruit labor. Okay, they have beer tents, they have music playing. And right now, everybody in Mexico is competing for labor.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's doing two things. It's either driving up the labor cost itself, or what we had to do is shuttle people from their home to their work, give them 3 meals a day at the factory, and have the equivalent of a doctor at the factory for free health care. So when you look at Malaysia, Vietnam, India, there's an inexhaustible supply of labor there. Okay, and a Deloitte study didn't mention that. Even in the United States, if you're coming back onshore, we're almost in a negative employment situation right now in industrial workers. So, like I said, when I started, this whole thing makes my head spin.
Yeah. It's a good, let's jump into that, because the next thing I wanted to talk about were challenges, right? Because, and there's two questions, right? And you guys have mentioned it already. On the one hand, is the receiving country or region or state or town or whatever, have they got the infrastructure? And the infrastructure isn't just like the roads and the buildings, but it's also the labor availability. And we all know what kind of lead time it takes to train a machine operator, right? It's not overnight. You just take somebody off the street, you stick them on a high-tech machine and they're productive, right? I mean, there's lead times to all of that. And then on the company side, the question is, do you have control of your tooling? I mean, never mind moving tooling, like, do you even have clear ownership of it, right? Many companies think they own it, and then when they go to move it, they realize they don't own it, and there's a squabble with the factory. Do you have project managers that have the ability to track a factory move and control? Like, a factory move is a major project. That's not a thing that you just like do in the background, right? So I'm interested to hear what you guys have in experience on the challenges side.
Yeah. Michelle, there's a major aerospace manufacturer that moved from Georgia to Killadora in Tijuana. Okay. This particular manufacturer moved about 1,400 different parts. Okay. And they completely underestimated the amount of skilled labor that would be required. And to your point, because they were moving tools and dies, okay, every item they produced had to go through an FAI.
Yeah.
Okay. So they ended up in a back order situation that was almost 19 months to the aerospace industry. I mean, because they just blew it. They underestimated the requirements, to your point, and now they're just feeling all types of pain and angst.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. And Julia, do you want to jump in here?
Yeah. I mean, we move. I've since Eric mentioned, sadly, moving tools tend to break molds. Absolutely. This is, for example, we have customers who, sell in e-commerce. They make 2, 3, 6, 700 million per year, which is not so little, not so much. And they prefer to move tools. So we've been moving a lot of tools outside of China to Europe, to Mexico, to US. And it's very problematic because machinery is different. The abilities, efficiency, effectiveness, and the capabilities that you have in China versus what you have in Mexico are absolutely different. With the Chinese factory, you were talking in 5 minutes, issues are resolved if you know how to talk to them. You're talking to a person in Mexico. First of all, you must speak Spanish. Secondly, it's they have a fiesta, this and that and that. 2 weeks later, you're still discussing the same point. So you need a person on the ground there. There you go. You need a person on the ground in those countries where you're moving to. Like China, for example, they are outsourcing tons of the manufacturing, that the huge factories, the 3M, all of those guys, they're moving to Africa right now. Like,
oh, wow.
China is building factories in Africa because their labor is cheaper. So they're moving things in there. But you need people on the ground to understand the culture and to know how to make people work. Otherwise, things are not going to be done. Moving large factories, huge conglomerates, this is a story for years to come. This is not a matter of months or 1 year or anything like this. So much skilled labor is required. Unless they're set up for this financially, they have the money because they will need to pay. No one is going to give them huge credits there unless they have a lot of friends within the country. They need to be prepared both with the people on board that they have on the ground and financially as well. Otherwise, they're just going to waste time, money, and all of the resources that they have invested into it.
Yeah. Other challenges that people want to bring up that they've seen in nearshoring?
What I would like to bring up a couple of them. Some of my customers have experienced this, of course, in Mexico, with as you mentioned earlier, land, the prices, right?
Okay.
To lease anything, I think they probably are spending they spend almost a year to find a place, and then comes the fitting the factory, getting everything done. I mean, that's taking a lot of time. Labor. Also, the labor part, I just want to chime in on this one, is if you look at the labor in a factory manufacturing environment, you're looking at machine operators and so on, but then there are other elements to it. You were mentioning, right, Michelle, project managers, or let's take about quality. For example, a 7-layer board, a PCBA out of China, and that has to be tested and looked at from a quality perspective. I mean, you need to have the skill set also when you're looking at nearshoring to understand what it entails. Or let's say, for example, tooling, you need to have the skill set to build that and design that. So those are the challenges. And then one other thing which we have seen is the product itself. Well, some of my customers were actually, and we were doing the analysis, building the supply chain model and different scenarios of nearshoring versus Asia and so on and so forth. One of the challenges is the product ready to be, I mean, what they were looking was specifically postponement, not complete manufacturing.
Yeah.
So, the vanilla product comes out of Asia, and then the final postponement in different flavors would kind of, be done in the region based on the demand is coming in. But then you have to look at the product design. Is a product flexible enough that it can be postponed, the design flexible enough can be postponed and be done closer to the demand? So those are some of the challenges which we are seeing, where you simply cannot, maybe the product is just not possible to do any kind of postponement.
In a two-step, you're saying in a two-step process, like it's not made as a sub-assembly and then an assembly kit, and you have to suddenly,
And that means if you want a regional strategy or a nearshoring strategy, then your product design has to be
adaptable to that. Yeah. That's a good point. That's a really good point. So, I mean, and I think then that goes back to our original question is we talked about it a bit in the beginning of, is it really essential that you nearshore, right? There's this reaction, and certainly, we're talking about tariffs, we're talking about concerns like politically and business ethics around China in terms of how transparent are they willing to be around their sourcing and their environmental impact and in laws, right? Which is always, we started out with a big problem in China, and it's gotten better and better over the years, certainly. But is it still at the point where everybody wants it to be? Probably not. There's all these reasons why people want to go away from China, but is it really necessary, and is it worth the cost of moving? And how are people determining that, or is everybody just in this fantasy stage where they're refusing to listen to logic at all, and they're just saying, "I want my stuff moved"? Yeah, Yulia.
If you don't mind me, one of the things people don't understand when they're talking about China, bad, they're dealing badly with humans and they're killing the environment and stuff like this. We need to understand one thing, and this is what people forget about. Most of the companies, conglomerates, they're trying to move their production, their manufacturing still to developing countries due to the cost of labor. As soon as they will move it, the story will repeat itself. They will screw up the environment, the regulations, BSA, 8,000, all of those things, they will go to hell. We have tons of examples like this with, for example, India, where there is like a textile conglomerate that has all of the best factories and has all of the approvals. But then you place an order with them and they outsource it to a guy who sits in the basement, who sniffs the paint, etc., and they produce for Zara, H&M. So you need to have people on the ground. You need to have that control. And this is what we're seeing. Major reasons for our customers, big and small, to move the factories, the manufacturing closer to themselves is so they can have better physical control, visitation rights, so to speak, that they have faster delivery times, meaning the liquidity, the turnaround from the moment they place an order to the moment the cash starts coming from the sales is a lot faster for them, right? So this is what they're looking for, because the margins on any of the goods, for Siemens or for a person who sells on Amazon, they're shrinking. So those are the major shifts that we're seeing.
China is still an option as long as you have boots on the ground that are trusted. For example, we have partners in Hong Kong as well as Mainland, and that we've been working with for 20 years, and so we still engage with them. But it's because they're very, very well trusted partners that we know
Yeah.
They're very well vetted up to the ownerships. So as long as you have that level of connection, it's still viable. Otherwise, it's a little bit dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the risk isn't China itself. I mean, let's face it, we've all had great suppliers in China that have been awesome and gone above and beyond. And we've had, thieves. But that's also true in every other country we've dealt with, including the United States, right? There are some really crappy suppliers right in the US that you cannot trust and you do not want to do business with. So it's not, I think that the add to that they're far away. And I think this is the key that you're just saying, Rob, is do you have someone close by that has a relationship and that you can manage this relationship in this country? And
that you trust that person.
That you can trust.
That's the big
there you
thing.
go. Right. I mean, no matter what the country is, Mexico, China, India, Malaysia, they all have different. UK, we had a plant in Ireland that was a pain to manage, right? They all have different cultures. These are all completely different cultures. They have different expectations. You need someone that really understands and can navigate those, or to be the translator between the cultures in your company, right? American culture, a lot of American companies, think we're the boss and we'll just tell everybody what to do. And we as supply chain people know how successful that is, right? So, yeah. It's really, so I, what do you guys think in general in terms of, if you're going to talk to a manufacturing executive and they say, I'm hearing all this stuff, Asia is not the place to go. I want a nearshore. What's your advice? Is it you should look at it? Is it you should be more, Rich started with an analysis. Akhil is a software company that really looks analytically at it. What's the bottom line that you guys are advising businesses at a high level that are maybe part of this survey that think by 2029 they're going to have 40% of their stuff move?
I think Akhil had a good point, because what he was saying before, it's not only that it's manufactured close to you and the price is better. There are so many different factors that need to be considered in the calculation and the projections. Price, shipping, political situation, import tax, VAT, all of those things. So it's not the point that you shouldn't nearshore or should. It is, what are your goods? What are your products? Because every country also has different capabilities. You do not go to Russia to produce coffee. You do not go to Germany to manufacture to get tea. You go to India, you go to Cambodia, Malaysia. So you need to look at what capabilities the country has and what connections in terms of supply chain that country has as well. When we're looking in China, the roads were built by the government, the ports were built by the government to support the development of the manufacturing. Yeah. When you're going to Mexico, when you're going to Czech Republic, when you're going to Germany, he has a Laga, which is a warehouse next door. He's like, I don't know who this guy is. I can't recommend you a warehouse. I'm like, literally, you're looking at this person. So this communication does not exist. So you need to look at the capabilities, not only of the manufacturer, but of the countries, and what do they have as resources that they can offer. And then the company can decide, because there's so many factors to consider.
Let me ask you guys something here, because that chart that we saw about where everybody's expecting it to go, I was really surprised by the highlight of Texas in the United States. And I'm not from Texas, so I don't know Texas very well, but I was surprised to see so much of that surveyed group expect to move to Texas. So do you guys see is the infrastructure there? Is that what you guys are seeing?
Yeah, one of the things that Texas has got better than any other state in the United States is they have leveraged the living daylights out of their foreign trade zones. Like they have, if you look at Houston, you look at some of the ports down there, they have VW is there. They run billions of dollars through there. Now, Tennessee, Indiana, which is kind of the weird inland states, but also California. But Texas is easily, you look at any of the, and maybe I'll put it into the chat there, a link that they are the king and queen of leveraging their foreign trade zones for manufacturing and employment. They've done it better than anyone else has. That's one of the reasons. Plus, you have a very pro you have a very pro, I'm not want to get the political thing, but the administration is very, very pro business in that state as well.
There are a couple other things to add to that one, is again giving you some concrete example of some of our customers, and we did some analysis for them. From a Texas, it's interesting when I saw that report. There are two things I think also add to it. Now we're talking just about the last mile, so to say.
Yeah. Okay.
Of that supply chain. The customer had one DC in the US, and it was supplying all over the US. Of course, their customer expectations basically include, hey, we want it faster. So then we look at two DCs, where to place them. And we always see that California, Memphis area, Tennessee, Kentucky comes out to be the right locations. But then their customers' demands increase, hey, we need much faster than that. What is a third DC location? And it's interesting that Texas comes out really well, considering the location based on the delivery times, and of course there is infrastructure, so on and so forth. It turns out that Texas, from a last mile delivery perspective, if you want to have like the lowest cost, fastest time kind of an option, lowest logistics cost, fastest time, and if it's a 3 DC network, so to say, within the US, then Texas comes out as a third DC.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, because I'm thinking about, Julia's point of China built those cities, many cities in China were built based on this industrial movement of goods and manufacturing, right? There was nothing there. Everybody moved and they created these cities, and that infrastructure around them, it supports that, right? The roads, they're super efficient. That's not necessarily true of the United States, right? Like we weren't built from modern industry. We were built for industry, whatever, years ago. And
there's
so
a bigger problem, Michelle, because there is a huge there is a deficit of truckers, both in US, in Canada, and all over Europe. There are not enough people driving the trucks that go from Atlanta to Las Vegas or something like this. So this will increase. First of all, you need to attract those people. Then the salaries will go up. Then the costs will go up, etc., etc. It's like it's a cake, a bad cake, not delicious one, where one problem piles up on top of the other.
Yeah, it's tipping over right now. It's a tippy, saggy cake. Yeah. No, it's really interesting to see where this will all go. Let me just see. There were some comments here. Eric, where are you? Do you want to chime in on this? I mean, rail infrastructure for sure is in the US is you can't count on, I don't think, right? I mean, where are you? Wait a minute, I have to ask to unmute. Let me try this.
Yeah, I think, if you look at how our ports perform, especially, I'm in Southern California. So the LA ports were horrendous. Problems were not the Chinese ports and the Singaporean ports and all that. Our ports are terrible. So if you put more volume in there, that's going to take some political willpower to change that from, a private concern into something that's, United States infrastructure. Yeah. And I've had projects in China that had 3,000 CNCs allocated to them. And just the fact of, I work for that big, crazy company. We had 13,000 CNCs available for our projects. And so just getting that many CNCs in the US will take time, because the builders of the big units, they can make a very small amount of it's like I had one factory floor that had more CNCs than all the prototyping CNCs in the world. Wow. And that capacity takes a while to build. Most of the CNC makers are relatively small, the high quality ones. And there's a worldwide shortage of CNC programmers. It's been a problem.
Just the tiers that come off. You just picture a CNC, and then you think of everyone involved in making that all the way down the chain, right?
And the tooling and everything else. The reason that we built in Shanghai, I started a startup and built in Shanghai is in that 40 or 50 mile radius. It's the highest concentration of CNCs and talent in the world, and nothing substitutes for that.
And that's a relatively expensive area, Shanghai, I would think, right?
Yeah, I mean, it goes out, Suzhou and all that whole
big,
area.
yeah.
Yeah, okay, that region, okay.
That whole region. I mean, if you go out there, pretty much, within a 5-hour drive, you can get to the largest concentration of CNCs. You got to think of California as the other big manufacturing powerhouse in the world. I mean, it's the 5th largest economy in the world and 40 million people. That same infrastructure shrunk into like that, 40, 50
5-mile radius. Jeez. Yeah.
And the other thing is, building that up will take time. I've been doing this for 36 years on the engineering side, manufacturing engineering, and supply chain side. I mean, it took 20 years to lose all of our mold making. And mold making went to Taiwan, then it moved to China. Getting that back, that there's mold making, there's CNC work, and then there's mold making. That's a very high tier.
Yeah.
And it's going to take a long time, and we got to be committed. One thing that really struck me in the early days, and this was back in the late 90s, I actually transferred our production of machines at a company called Kulik and Sofa over to Malaysia, Singapore, and China. And I was really struck in both Singapore and Malaysia. I was dealing with guys that were my age, I was in my 30s, that had large factories that they controlled because they could show the government, here, I've got some POs, give me money for CNCs. And none of that exists in the US. So
yeah, no, it's true.
We're gonna have to commit to it long term. And like moving stuff, like moving molds. I mean, I've moved lots of molds and they tend to break just because people can be a little bit devious with molds, but the polymers are different. Like if you look in polymers from, say, Sabic, the polymers that are available in China are different than US just because the environmental concerns are different. They're not better or worse, but different. So I always tell people, like, you can't get MEK here, you can get acetone. In China, you can't get acetone, you get MEK. So there's just a different in the chemicals they're allowed to use. So moving molds to a different country, you're going to get a different polymer and it will shoot differently. So
it'll wear differently, and okay.
So, and the machines, likely you don't have the machine you want to run on. So, the size of the injection molds and the molds, I mean, you're really run down to a very small amount of molds you could actually move. So, I mean, I've had, my last company asked me, we have to move everything to Mexico. Like, well, I don't have infrastructure in Mexico, and things move a lot slower. I mean,
well, I just shared that chart again.
Aggressive. Yeah.
I mean, that chart, I mean, look at that, you guys. I mean, 2025, they want to double the amount, up to 40% of their Asia traffic. They think they're going to move in 5 years, in 4 years, 4 years. Mm-hmm. That's pretty aggressive. You know what I mean? When I look at that,
it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
I'm just like,
that's what I'm hearing you guys say. I mean, that's why.
They may want it, but it may exactly.
Yeah. That's the intent and that's the desire. What'll be interesting to see is, and if it flattens out as everybody hits this reality, right, is, the desire is one thing, and you start it and then you realize all these problems, and then they're going to wind back and they're going to adjust to something like you guys were describing before, better alternatives to their initial, their initial plan.
And then, training CNC programmers, you have to be a pretty good CNC machinist first. Then you have to be a good programmer.
Yeah.
And to do molds, you have to be a multi-axis programmer. And in my experience of training a lot of these guys and going through that, there's about 30% of the people that can program 3-axis machines can't go to multi-axis. They can't visualize it in their head. So
and think about this for a second. Like when we moved to China, like the company I was at, when we moved product to China, we sent our engineers, we sent our senior operators. They went to China and they trained those operators. Okay. And what language did we use for this? English, right? Mm-hmm. Because the operators themselves in China didn't speak English, but their supervisors did, and they could translate. Fine. Now we're going to come the other way. You're going to take a team from China and they're going to come to Mexico or to the US and try to teach the US and Mexican team what they have from China. It's a lot more difficult going the other direction, right? From a language perspective, right?
Plus getting visas out of China is not exactly easy.
Yeah.
And we brought a team into Malaysia to learn from our assembly staff in Irvine, California. And that worked well. But I think when you move it to a different country to take advantage of their resources, you're going to have to change the design. I think moving existing design, one of the reasons that China was successful is designs got redone to build locally, just for necessity. And I think that's going to have to happen too. So, you know, the people that think that's going to happen quickly, I mean, they're the same ones that thought like in World War II, we're going to be able to hop in and change it. It took 18 months to convert to aviation gas because we didn't have that. So, and that's just one, it's not a little industry, but that's a little, you know, that's a couple processing plants. It's going to take a lot more time. I mean, we've done this stuff before and it just does not happen fast.
There's probably also pressure from the executives onto supply chain managers saying, hey guys, I need you to tell me yes, that this amount of quantity, this percentage will be moved outside of China closer to home by that time. And they say, okay, because they don't have a choice, and because the executives need to tell the Congress or whoever else that yes, this needs to be done. I mean, if you look on the pressure that China is putting, or sorry, the Congress is putting on China. I was watching the CEO of TikTok, poor guy. I felt so bad for him. It was insane how they demolished him. And the same is going to continue towards Huawei, towards all of the other companies and all of those things. They make people kind of promise things which are not possible, but they have to because they have no choice. And then the reality kicks in. So no, those numbers that are shown in the article are far from truth. I mean, even small, like we have customers who only make 50 million per year. You can't move them. You can't move that fast, but they can have, I don't know, 500 SKUs only, right? And you need to move all of them, small ones. It's insane. It's possible, but insane. The big ones, no.
Yeah, costly. I mean, it's all underestimated. What's interesting to me is I think hearing you guys, you know, the benefits, you know, so that survey, right? Who benefits from nearshoring? It's, you know, US, Mexico, right? Given all the problems, it's interesting to me to hear really who might benefit from this nearshoring charge is Africa, as China outsources to Africa to try to get lower prices and continue being competitive, and other Asian countries, right, who are the real receivers of the product, even though the intent was to get to the US and Mexico. The middle point that everybody can live with is maybe moving it to other neighbors countries there, and maybe they're going to develop faster. So that's kind of interesting. Yeah, Rich. Oh,
Turkey is another country. Turkey is another country that's benefiting.
Turkey also.
Pakistan.
Okay.
Oh yeah, hugely. Pakistan is another country that's reaping the benefits. Tons of factories all around Europe are completely booked out. We have a customer who sells seeds. He sells seed, like planting, right? Globally. We were in touch with about 400, even more, different manufacturers and distributors of seeds globally. And we were told all of the seeds are booked out, the purchasing, until the end of 2024. So we ended up buying a farm in India and in Thailand, and now we're growing those seeds because there is no supply. It's because there's such huge demand, and there's for tons of things like this. You can see all over Europe. Electronics is moving to India, to Malaysia, to Morocco, and you need to look at different countries. But yeah, those are benefiting for sure.
Yeah, interesting.
I think Eric's point. Eric was right on point with his comments. But the thing to consider, all these companies that are saying they're going to begin reshoring or nearshoring, I think there's a backstory to it that we're overlooking. One is you're not going to bring something onshore if it's going to increase your costs and put you in a competitive disadvantage situation. So there's the element of capital investing. Okay, to Eric's point, you know, I'm not going to bring these tools back in the US. I may develop multiple cavity tools, okay, which are going to increase productivity and output, okay, and I'm going to leverage technology to reduce my labor requirement. So, you know, while we look at this whole reactionary situation, I'm coming on shore, there certainly has to be a value proposition to do it, right?
Yeah.
Or why would you do it?
Yeah.
But what I'm trying to make is there's a capital component of this, which is driven by, the economy in general, interest rates, how much money is actually sitting on the sidelines. So a lot of considerations.
Yeah. And these crazy interest rates are not going to help the investment right now. So, I mean, it's a really bad, if you want to fix this economy, reduce the interest rates and invest in manufacturing, I would. I do see some specialization. So, like Thailand's always been kind of like the foundry of, Southeast Asia. I think not one of those countries has enough people. So for some of my projects, they just don't. Our company actually looked into Nigeria as well, and actually they don't have that many people. They're actually overstating their population a bit, is what we feel. I think, there's not one country that can take that load from China because it's a massive thing. But I think, like Yulia said, there's certain areas of specialties, like Morocco is going to be big in electronics. And there's some Eastern European countries that can take some of this load, but there's some stress in that area as well. So I think you just get some specialties and a little bit more transit will be involved. I think South America has got some good options as well, but there's also some instability there.
Yeah.
And there's infrastructure issues there also, right? You're moving farther away and
they're everywhere. The US has got them as well. So those are going to have to be solved, at a higher level.
Yeah. My concern is actually, what we saw in this outsourcing or offshoring that happened. I still remember some of my clients back then. This was probably mid 2000, 2005, 2004, 2006. And moved to China. We did the complete total cost of ownership analysis. We showed them everything. And the result, I still remember this. Even if they have to airship because of demand volatility, if they have to airship 5% of the volume, it didn't make any sense. So there was a hybrid model which we had suggested, but no, there was this whole push and this what we call
need to be in China.
Bandwagon. Let's join. We have to go to China. Lower cost, and just the labor part, by the way. Unfortunately, I don't know. Hopefully not, but and I don't think it's even possible because of the challenges that we just spoke about. This whole nearshoring, onshoring trend that is going on, or the talk about it that's going on. You have to methodically think about it, right? Some cases it makes absolute sense to do it. In some cases it doesn't make any sense. It's a very interesting thing. Every time I walk around somewhere, if you see on the road the manhole covers, those big ones, I see made in India. And then at home I have the large cast iron pan, which is made in USA. So you have to also think about what kind of market, what customers you're serving, right? That it's and Dr. Hawley from Stanford, I always quote this. He had written this AAA supply chain probably 3 decades or 2.5 decades ago. The best supply chains aren't just fast or cost effective. They are aligned, they are adaptable to all the company's interests, right? So you've got to think about, not just because everyone is thinking about moving onshoring or offshoring, but what makes sense based on the markets you serve, the customers you serve, what your company goals and, what your goals are and so on and so forth. Because in some cases, even if it means I've seen companies who manufacture in the US, even if there's a premium for it, of course, they will do it. And there are customers buying that. They may not grow at the rate that some of the other competitors are doing by getting some products out of Asia, maybe not, right? So that's where we have to be careful. And I always advise my clients or anybody who's talking about, shall we move onshore or nearshore? It's like, does it make sense for you? Let's look at it methodically, analytically. All the other factors have to be considered. And even if it is possible or not, before even jumping into it and spending money, think about whether it's even doable. So that's what I always think about and advise them.
Yeah, it's surprising. There's a number we all know, and Julia said it earlier, right? We've all been asked to implement suboptimal supply chain decisions for one reason or another, right? Whatever the reason might be. And companies are still doing it today against, you know, all kinds of analysis and very clear data. They will still implement really a non-agile, clunky supply chain for whatever reason they think makes sense, right? I think
but I think what Akhil rightly said, hybrid model. This is, you know, the graph, the pretty graph in the Deloitte article. This is what we're going to see in those numbers when they do the onshore and offshore and reshoring and all of that stuff. This is where the hybrid model will be at closing to the peak. And then later on, at another 5 to 10 years, then we're talking, yay, I completely transferred all of my production in there. We see hybrid model all over the place. Yeah. They just want to have a good backup. They want to make sure that in case China goes berserk again, or any other country for that matter, they just want diversify. It doesn't matter if their original manufacturing is based in China. They just want two separate countries that preferably are far from one another and don't have the same political situation. So we've been seeing a lot of that as well. Hybrid.
Yeah, just risk protection you're talking about, just protecting from a risk perspective.
Yep.
Yeah, interesting. And are they willing to pay a premium for that, Yulia, or are they saying, "Well, I want that, and I'm also looking for lower cost while I do that"? Are people? Of
course, everyone is looking for lower cost. Come on, no one is going to, you know, to a sourcing company or a sourcing agent saying, "Hey guys, get us a higher price." No, of course they're looking for lower cost. Sometimes they get it. Sometimes they get an optimized supply chain due to lower taxes and due to decreased shipping costs, right? But
yeah, okay.
To ship a container from China right now to US, I mean, we're booking a 40 high cube container for like $900. I mean, how much cheaper can you go when last year it was 17 to 20K, right? Yeah. So when you're looking at those options, you're also looking like at additional things like we've mentioned, the shipping, the import tax, et cetera, and trying to kind of optimize that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, great.
Yeah. The other thing that I've had a couple of clients, and what turns them is a lot of these clients have a lot of aluminum components, and the price of aluminum in China, I can get completed parts in China for less than the cost of raw material in the US.
Wow.
So that generally kills. I show them that, and I take, you know, there's a couple of the things I'm working on have about 30 or 40% machined aluminum content or cast aluminum content. And
is that because the aluminum is all originating from China, Eric?
Well, part of it is that, you know, US has got kind of an aluminum cartel. We need aluminum to make, you know, to go into war with. I mean, that's why all the hydro-powered plants are done in the Western United States. Takes a lot of energy. So we have good aluminum, but China's got much, much cheaper aluminum. And I don't care labor costs or anything. I can, doesn't really matter. If the material is that expensive, there's nothing I can do to make it work.
To offset that. Yeah. Okay.
Nothing.
Interesting.
So yeah, the material costs are substantially different for some of the base materials. Now it's not true across the board, and you have to be flexible with your material selection, but there are times when, you know, it's like a third sometimes.
Wow. And then Mitch is saying in the comments there's anti-dumping duties to deal with. Jeez. All right.
Yeah. And it depends where you're selling your products. I think Yulia and a couple of people mentioned if your sales are outside the United States, then that changes your landed cost all the time. So yeah, it's a complex problem, but if you know, I've been able to show some of my clients like real simple analysis, and like you can't get around it. You don't have to do the whole analysis. Just, you know, cost a couple of parts and see what you're getting, and you know, it's very predictable.
It's very clear what the conclusion is going to be. Yeah. Okay.
I say that people, our customers, I call them, you have very creative ideas. You have wonderful creative ideas and creative brain, you know, to be extremely diplomatic, because yes, you know, everything is possible. But in your particular case, it's absolutely impossible at this particular moment, unless you're completely loaded with money and you're ready to put it out there. So, you know, then they become, oh, okay, then let's do this then. You know, what's your advice? So, yeah.
All right. Great discussion, you guys. And so anything else we missed when we talk about, like, as we wrap kind of this thing up on nearshoring, any major aspects of it that you guys think that need to be considered that we haven't already talked about? No, we've covered everything.
Pretty much.
All right, great. Well, I want to thank you guys, especially the panelists, but you guys that jumped in, commenting. It's been a really interesting discussion. I learned a ton. I encourage you guys to reach out to each other on LinkedIn, get connected. It's really nice to just know more people in the supply chain space and know what you guys are each other is capable of and what our expertise is. And stay on the Silicon Valley Supply Chain Meetup site. Keep an eye out for our next meetup. And let me know if there's topics that you would be interested in or that you are an expert in that you think we should talk about and should be a subject of a panel discussion. Because I think it's a nice, easy way to have a discussion virtually and really get good expert information about important supply chain topics. So let's keep this going, right?